Purple to me. What is it though?
I mean, if you were sitting beside me, you'd say, that is a black jacket.
But
Maybe
even
it's
your
a-
tank top, lift up, even your tank top looks purple.
Yeah.
And then, Kate, do you want to, should I leave introductions to you for the chairs and all that business? Do
Yes,
you want to
please.
do that?
Yes,
Okay.
please. I'm happy to do those.
Okay, and then I'm just going to wait one more second for Ms. Jalali as she was
Absolutely.
our representative.
Absolutely. And this is being live streamed.
Okay.
Is it?
Yes,
Yeah.
it will be as soon as we say,
As soon as we
as
say
soon
it's
as
happening.
Council President convenes
Calls
the
it to
meeting.
order.
He calls it
Yeah.
to order.
We saved the jabbering about purple jackets for not live streaming.
Absolutely. I hear you. Hi, John. Good morning.
Morning, everybody. Good to see faces.
Mm-hmm.
It is lovely to see everyone. Welcome, Citizens League.
Thank you, Councilmember
Thank
Prince.
you. Nice
And
to see you
thanks so
again.
much to our co-chairs, Akua and John. It's great to have you here.
Pleasure to participate. Absolutely.
Up. All right. I see Ms. Jalali is here as well. Okay, we were just making sure that we had council members ready, and as Ms. Prince pointed out, our co-chairs are here as well, so it looks like we are ready to roll. So if we're our media services are ready and we're ready to record, I will call the St. Paul City Council's org committee to order. Good morning. It's a muggy one here in St. Paul. I just went out for a walk around beautiful Como Lake and it was lovely and sweaty. Just a nice warm morning, bringing the rain that we desperately need. So it's nice here, beautiful spring weather. We are this morning having our long awaited and anticipated report from the Citizens League regarding our community first public safety questions around priority 4 and 5 calls and the continuation of advisory commission and an Office of Violence Prevention, and just a discussion that a panel of, I believe, nearly 50 members has muddled through for the past 6 months. And so I am going to turn things over to Kate Cimino, the Executive Director of the Citizens League, in just a moment, but I just wanted to, a little housekeeping before we get started. The slide presentation we'll have today really builds one slide to the next. And so if folks could hold their questions, substantive questions, just jot them down and we'll get to them at the end. And Ms. Cimino believes she'll probably cover them. But if there's clarifying questions along the way about an acronym that's being used, or can't read something on a slide, if you just want to throw the hand up, I'll make sure that we call on you. But it sounds like the goal is to kind of get through it in a building manner to the end, and half our time is for presentation and half the time is geared towards the Q&A. So we'll have plenty of time to dig in and answer questions, or ask and answer questions after we've heard the full presentation. So I am going to turn things over to Ms. Cimino to drive this morning, and I would be remiss if I didn't first say thank you, huge debts of gratitude for our for our colleague, Ms. Jalali, who was our representative on the Community First Public Safety Commission. And I know she did a lot of work, especially kind of translating, advocacy and policy and process and the kind of the sausage grinding that it takes to get from one place to another. And we really appreciate that work. She missed most of our org committee meetings this spring to do that. So we appreciate her sacrifice and her commitment. And then just again, appreciate the work of our co-chairs and Citizens League for leading this important effort and helping us make a plan to move forward to a kind of a different future and a different approach at really public safety. So I'll turn things over to you, Ms. Semino. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much, Council President Bremo. Appreciate that warm introduction. And hello, Council members. Thank you so much for having us here today and for the opportunity to be with you and present the results of this work. My name is Kate Semino. I serve as Executive Director of the Citizens League, and I'm here with my colleague Amanda Kunchbahari, Director of Public Policy for the League. And we are also joined today by Commission co-chairs Akua Ellis and John Marshall, who will be also offering comments at the conclusion of the presentation. What Amanda and I would like to do today is to walk you through both the process and the outcomes of the Community First Public Safety Commission. So I'll start off and then turn it over to Amanda. And as Council President said, if you have clarifying questions about what's that acronym, or I can't see the text on that slide or something, please feel free to jump in, or any clarification of something that wasn't clear. But substantive questions or deeper material questions, we do prefer that we can dig in on those at the end, and we have built in a lot of time for that as well. So Ms. Hurston, if you're able to share the slides, fantastic, good. So that's our little intro. Good, first, next slide, please. I do want to share a bit about the Citizens League and the work that we do. Our mission, we are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization empowering people to engage in civic life and public policy to make Minnesota a better place to live and work for everyone. We've been doing this work for nearly 70 years, based in St. Paul, but working statewide. And the Citizens League is a long-standing policy organization. We bring people together to create solutions to some of the most challenging and complex public policy issues that our state faces. One key piece of our approach is that we bring those most impacted by and most connected directly to the issues to the center and ensure that their perspectives, expertise, insights are at the center of our work. Because we're nonpartisan, that gives us this ability to bring together people of different ideologies, different perspectives to the table to craft together really meaningful solutions. In particular, when the issues are incredibly nuanced and complex, this topic today is a perfect example of the work of what the Citizens League was able to bring to this work. An example of that work in 2018, you can actually stay there for a second. In 2018, the League was commissioned by the City of St. Paul to conduct a minimum wage study committee. And that process led to recommendations that have now been implemented by the city, by the mayor. So many of you remember that work as well, and we're directly involved. So we're grateful that at this point where public safety has been front of mind, front of heart and soul for so many folks, that the mayor and the city recognize the Citizens League's ability to bring people together to work on this through what was a challenging time that we're happy to, that we will be sharing more about as well. And we were honored to be asked to be part of and complete this project, and very proud and humbled to be with you here today. So what I'd like to do is first share with you some of the basics of the commission, kind of the who, the what, and the process that we used over the course of these 6 months. And then I'll be turning it over to Amanda, who will lead us through more of the content of the work and the recommendations and outcomes that emerged. Next slide, please. The Community First Public Safety Commission was established at the end of 2020, December 2020, and was charged with 3 distinct tasks by Mayor Carter: to develop alternative first response models to priority 4 and 5 calls for service, and to recommend approaches for ongoing community involvement in the city's broader Community First Public Safety framework. And the third, to consider the creation of a city staffed office such as an Office of Violence Prevention, to drive and integrate these strategies and initiatives. Today, what you'll hear from us is a set of recommendations, well, first some background and then some recommendations on that first item, the priority 4 and 5, we'll call those the alternative response segments of the recommendations. And then another set of recommendations that encompass the second 2 bullets kind of together. And that was a part of the work that we had a collaboration with the Harvard Kennedy School Government Performance Lab, and their work with the commission will be represented in those second 2 bullets. Council members know, I would like to clarify for other members of the public who may be watching as well, that this commission was but one part of Mayor Carter's broader Community First public safety framework that is prioritizing some investments around St. Paul in a number of different areas, and this commission was one piece of that. Next slide, please. Amanda and I and our Citizens League team had the great fortune to work with 2 co-chairs on this project named by the mayor, and fantastic to be in partnership with both of you. Akua Ellis, Senior Vice President of Community Impact at Greater Twin Cities United Way, and John Marshall, who is Director of Community Relations and Foundation for Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota at Xcel Energy. And they, as I mentioned, will be offering some comments at the conclusion of the deck here. Our project team at the Citizens League, myself as Executive Director, Amanda Kunchbahari as our Director of Public Policy, Jacob Tainter is our Communications and Marketing Specialist, and he was not front of the scenes, but did an incredible amount of work behind the scenes, particularly because all of our meetings were virtual, to make sure that we were able to successfully hold these meetings virtually and communicate out with the public about that work. Additionally, several folks who were key to the success of this project, Madeline McHugh was our project assistant, helped in almost every way on this project, and Ben Gleagle offered research assistance as well. So I want to acknowledge personally the hard work that every one of these folks that you see on this slide and more put into this project over the course of 6 months. Thank you. Next slide, please. So I know this is tiny font. This is not new information. This list was released in the mayor's press release in December 2020. This list lives also on the Citizens League's website for the dedicated site for this project. So you are welcome to go and visit the list if you would like to go deeper. What we wanted to highlight, and that's why we crammed them all on one slide, was the size of this group. It was a large group of people. It was 48 commissioners that were named and appointed by Mayor Carter. It included people from all sorts of various sectors. And as you look through here, you'll see education, you'll see youth, young people. We had high school students, college students, business, cultural and other affinity groups. There were members of law enforcement. We had advocacy organizations, faith communities, there were intergovernmental partners and philanthropy and more. And there were also at-large members, residents of St. Paul, who had an at-large status on the commission. This list here and their affiliations, this is directly from the mayor's December press release. So throughout the duration, we did see attrition of just 2 commission members. Some other folks also had some changes in their organizational affiliation for several that may not be shown here, but you can get the sense of the group. And I will also say these folks are not just that thing after their name, after the comma. They all brought multiple identities and realities of their own life and their own self and their own lived experience. And we did invite that to be part of what they brought to the process. We did not say to anybody, check yourself at the door, put your own family and your lens at the door. We said, bring it in, talk about it, bring it to the work. And that was a big part of what made this group come together and helped this work be successful. I will also say the good move, I think, by the mayor's office was to also appoint a number of representatives from the city and the county, from St. Paul and Ramsey County, from all various departments, to be representatives to the commission. And they were asked to attend every commission meeting. And if asked or if needed, provide insight on different city county services, structures, as those items came up in discussion. So they were present as resources throughout. Thank you so much. But they did not participate in the development of the actual recommendations. Next slide, please. I'll say a bit about the meeting process. Those of you who remember minimum wage project, those were in-person meetings, of course. This time, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, I'm in my basement right now. We held all of these meetings virtually. They were held via Zoom video. And we had 10 3-hour meetings, approximately every other week from December 2020 through April 2021. This equaled a total of commission time together, a total of 30 hours. I want to just underscore that that is less than one full work week, less than one 40-hour work week. If you started this project on Monday morning, 30 hours would get you to about Thursday, 3 o'clock. So it was a vast amount of work to move through in that time. So the commissioners are to be commended and thanked for their contributions and their efforts to this really intense work over just 30 hours. The meetings were made available to the public. We live streamed all the meetings on YouTube. We did not record the meetings. We did not video record the meetings. We recorded audio just to make minutes, and then those recordings were deleted. Minutes were created following each meeting, and then we had an approval by a majority vote at the subsequent commission meeting. A few process points that I want to share. I think this informs I think it reflects how we moved through this work, but also could inform future work on these really intense topics. One is that because we were aware of the intensity of the issues and the strain on members of our community throughout these 6 months, a brief time was reserved near the beginning of every meeting for what we call the mindfulness moment, and that was led by wonderful contributions by our commission member, Natalia Davis. We also built in time, because you don't get that interaction and conversational opportunity when you're on a virtual interface, we built in time at each meeting for most meetings, especially in the first half of the process, for commission members to work in small groups, to get to know each other, to process the meetings, the content, and then to do work together on the content of the work, developing recommendations. So we built in small group time as much as we possibly could. The Citizens League process is shown here in 3 phases, and there's a reason why that first phase is bigger, and it's because that first phase is longer. We really focus at the Citizens League on, before you jump to conclusions, before you jump to recommendations, or even thinking about them, you have to do the work of learning, discovery, understanding, exploring first, and together. So phase 1, we call this the discovery stage. We really focused on presentations, questions and answers. The commission worked together to understand what's the current landscape of emergency response. What is currently happening in St. Paul? What's available when people pick up that phone and need help, or when an officer drives by and sees something happening that people may need assistance or something of concern. So we really spent a lot of time there. And we spent time there also talking about how are the people of St. Paul experiencing all of that current response. During these early meetings, we invited the commission members to complete feedback surveys. And what we did on the Citizens League side is we took that feedback and looped that into helping design the successive meetings in terms of who's coming to speak, what do you want to know more about, what do you need more clarification on as we went along. You will see you can see on the website, you can also see in the final report, a full list of the speakers who came and spoke to the commission. But we talked about things like housing and homelessness, domestic and sexual violence. We talked about lots of different crisis response models and so forth. Next slide, please. So this timeline you're seeing here, this captures the process and the items that we covered throughout the course of the commission. So if you picture that phase 1, 2, 3, you'll see there's some overlap here. It was iterative. Each meeting, as I said, helped define the next. And if you picture here, we approximately had 2 meetings per month. So this is how the meetings kind of laid out. What I will do here is I'd like to walk through these brackets from top to bottom and say a bit more about each. I think this will help illuminate the process we went through, the volume of work that the commission accomplished during this time, and importantly, it will illuminate how we got to the outcomes and the recommendations that Amanda will speak about momentarily. The first bracket at the top of the page here, you'll see this is where we really went deep on learning about priority 4 and 5 situations and current response models. We actually spent a lot of time on this. It's really, really complex. So I want to share a few key learnings about these priority 4 and 5 situations. Amanda will go further on this during her segment as well, but I think this is important to clarify here why we needed to spend a lot of time as a commission, time and effort on this phase of learning and discovery. One is that sorry, I lost my, one is that we learned as a commission that priority 4 and 5 calls account for more than half of all calls when all contact methods are included. I'll explain what that means. There are a lot of different ways that people can interface with St. Paul Police Department situations. It can be a call to 911. It can be a call to the 7-digit non-emergency line. It can be online reporting, and also officer-initiated contact. When all those methods are included, we'll call all those contact methods, priority 4 and 5 account for nearly 60%. I think it's 57% of all calls. The Ramsey County ECC, that's the Emergency Communications Center, and you'll hear us use that ECC, that's Ramsey County Dispatch. They list nearly 50 different call types that fall within priority 4 and 5. Nearly 50 different call types and situations that can fall within priority 4 and 5. And so the commission needed to spend a lot of time exploring what those are and narrowing in on the ones that they felt had the greatest importance and potential impact. Again, Amanda will speak about that momentarily. A few other key things we learned is that priority levels, say priority 4, priority 5, that guides where the calls are placed in the officer queues and generally the order in which officers respond. If it's priority 2, 3, 4, 5, but situations can change. They're dynamic. They're not static. These are very emergent situations. These are very human situations that can change and escalate and change over time. And another key learning, and this is the last bit I'll say about these priority 4 and 5 situations, is that the same situation types, the same call types, can show up in different priority levels, 3 or 4, depending, or even 2, depending on their urgency and their recency. So it is not discrete that all the calls on a certain issue are only in priority 4. They can be priority 3 or even higher if the situation is unfolding in a way that is urgent, it's happening in the moment, and especially if there is a perceived threat to life or violence involved. So it was necessary for the commission to really understand not just what is considered priority 4 and 5, but really understand more about these call types across the spectrum because it is so dynamic. We couldn't just put up a wall and say we're not talking about that because it was impossible. We had to explore beyond just those priorities and understand the larger picture in order to then develop recommendations. Okay, so that's that top bracket. I'll move on to the one that's shown in orange here. These are town hall meetings. We held throughout the course of the project, we held 4 town hall meetings in March, 2 in March, 2 in April. And I want to really thank members of our commission. We had a team of commission members who planned, designed, and facilitated these town halls, working with us Citizens League staff. We created flyers for these town halls, these virtual town halls in 4 languages, English, Spanish, Hmong, and Somali, and circulated them to as broad an audience to invite folks to attend. And we had approximately 90 people attend the town hall meetings. They were really interactive, conversational, and we got some great content out of those. The summaries of these town halls are already up on our project website, on the Citizens League website, if you'd like to take a look, and they will also be included in the final report. So not shown here, but in kind of the orange category of community engagement, I do also want to mention that we, the Citizens League, offered multiple ways to interact with this project through a subscription email list. We had a dedicated input line, email, voicemail, Google form. We received about 15 comments through these channels, so not a huge number, but people were seeing them and submitting comments, and these were shared verbally back with the commission. Next bracket, you'll see right in the center there, Explored Office of Neighborhood Safety, and this is the part of the project, those second two bullets in the charge. The Harvard Kennedy School Government Performance Lab worked with us on this part of the project, and this was to recommend the ongoing community involvement and a potential city staffed office of violence prevention or neighborhood safety. And so Amanda will be going into this further in the presentation, and we want to also thank the Harvard GPL team for their great collaboration and their great work. Fourth bracket, you'll see staff researched other cities' models. We realized in this project that there was not, as far as we could find, a comprehensive resource available or a capture of a national scan of all of the different alternative response models that other cities were using. And in part, this is because a lot of these are still new, they're still emerging. Many have received an injection of energy and resources since this past summer after the killing of George Floyd. So we spent time in partnership also with the Greenlight Fund, thank you, exploring and collecting a national scan. That document is also available on our website and will be included in the report and was shared with the commission in March. So the fourth bracket down, this is where we really get into the meat of the work. We worked with the commission throughout the course of these meetings on an iterative process to, after we had done all this learning, done all this comprehending of the landscape, okay, now we're gonna ideate, we're gonna generate, we're gonna envision what kind of models we could see in St. Paul. So that is the work the commission did. They ideated, then they refined. We had multiple rounds of all sorts of different tools that were used to do this work, and eventually narrow in on the final recommendations, the top recommendations you will see today, and others will be and are included in our final report. I do want to mention one last bit on this slide here, and that is you'll see starting kind of down here in February, presentations, Robina Institute. This was the Robina Institute of Criminal Law and Criminal Justice. They were engaged by the mayor's office to assist in analyzing St. Paul's calls for service to determine if any patterns could be found in types or frequencies of the calls that might be informative to the commission. The Robina team did fantastic work. They presented some of their findings to the commission several times over the course of the project and were able to respond to questions and find out what the commission members really wanted to learn more about. Their full research report was completed after the conclusion of our April 21st final meeting. And that was due to the process of acquiring necessary data, as well as just the complexities of analyzing this data set. So that report was not, the full report was not incorporated into the commission's process, but it will be included in our final report appendix on this project. Next slide, please. So this is the last slide I will share, and then I will turn it over to Amanda. We call this the flower graphic. Midway through the process, the commissioners began expressing their desire to really define and name the problem we are trying to solve. Because as we worked through all of this, as you have seen, it was incredibly complex, and there was a sense that maybe we weren't sure whether there was alignment among commissioners of what problem we're even trying to solve. We wanted to name it, and so we spent time during meeting number 7. Commissioners discussed and explored this question, and then we followed the meeting with a survey. And then our team at the Citizens League created this graphic that encompasses 5 major areas of desired impact that emerged from the commission. You'll see this flower graphic actually is part of our survey prompt at the end, at the final survey as well, to see how closely our recommendations are aligning with these goals. We shared this back with the commission and discussed, and there was appreciation for seeing it, naming it, showing it, and there were no significant concerns expressed. So the flower graphic continues on and was used in our final survey, as you'll hear about momentarily. I will now turn it over to Amanda, who's going to really go deeper with us on the content of the commission's work on our different pieces of the charge, and she will also share the recommendations, some of the top recommendations that emerged.
Right. Thank you, Kate. Oh, I think I can hear my echo. How am I sounding? Better, I hope. All right. Well, thank you, council members, for having us. My name is Amanda Kunch-Bahari. I am the Director of Public Policy with the Citizens League, and really excited to be here with you today. As Kate mentioned, I'm going to be walking through really the process of how we got to the recommendations, and then highlighting some of the top recommendations for you all to see today. So I'm going to dive right in. As mentioned on the timeline slide that Kate went through, the commission spent a significant amount of time learning the definitions of priority 4 and 5 calls for service. I'm going to refer to those as P4 and P5 as we go through the conversation and the slides that are coming up. But as you can see on your screen, we have the definitions of how Ramsey County ECC and the St. Paul Police Department define those. Oh, thank you, Holly. I apologize. So on your screen now, you can see those definitions. And we wanted you to be able to just have those as something to refer back to, and we will talk about them as we continue going through this presentation. So I want to make a couple of notes about these priority call types. The priority structures that we have here are really determining the order in which a call is ranked as it's being dispatched. These prioritizations are not fixed, meaning that an ECC dispatcher or as police are learning more about the situation, the prioritization of that situation can change. And the priority of a call does not dictate the outcomes of the encounter. So as situations can escalate, and sometimes these calls are responded to with a citation, maybe an arrest, or possible use of force, and etc. And due to the fact that the priorities refer to the order in which the calls are ranked, and generally the order in which officers respond to these calls, what happens after that point of when it's dispatched is not prescribed. So situations can change rapidly, and they're very dynamic and individual. And because of this, the commission ended up reviewing the entire list of situations that can fall within these P4 and P5 call type categories. So we're going to be referring to this throughout the presentation as call type categories. And we end up having the commission rank what call type categories they think are most priority for the group to focus on. So we'll get into that as we go through the presentation. But wanted to make sure that we were identifying situations in that way, because calls can switch priority level. And again, we really wanted to make sure we were staying within the scope of this work. So we wanted to ensure that the call type categories we were looking at are considered non-urgent. So it's something that occurred more than 20 minutes ago, are non-violent with no reported threat to life or property. And the commission completed this call type prioritization through work of individual ranking. They did a lot of small group discussions, like Kate mentioned. A lot of consensus building happened. And then a survey that was eventually sent out to them after meeting 6. So again, we ended up looking at all of the different call type categories that can come up. And then the commission eventually kind of prioritized that list down. And we'll see that on the next slide. So Holly, if we can go to the next slide, that would be great. So this slide is really showing, so again, the Ramsey County Emergency Communication Center, they list tons of different call types within P4 and P5 categories. So there are nearly 50 different call types. And on your screen, what you're seeing right now is the results from that survey that we sent to the commission after meeting 6. And it really helped us determine, again, what call type categories should we be focusing on? Because with the timeline that we had, we didn't have enough time to look at all 50 of those things. So the commission kind of pared down what was of greatest interest to them and came up with this list of 8 call type categories. And what I want to do now, just to put further context on what these actually mean, I'm going to go through each of them, and I just want you to take note of what they mean, because once we get to the recommendations, it'll help kind of explain what those recommendations are within each of these category types. So the first one we have here, if we can go back, actually, we're going to stay on that last slide for a little bit. So first one is young person juvenile. This situation category is usually falling within a P4 priority level, and it can include situations such as curfew violations, statutory offenses, a youth or teenage child who someone perceives is out of control. Let's say a young person is left at school and they cannot contact a parent or a guardian, a child who is engaging in behavior that is concerning to somebody. So examples of that might be arguing with their parents, looking through windows, or gang affiliations and other things. And I want to note, these are not exhaustive examples. So in the final report, we do have more things listed. And ECC and St. Paul Police Department certainly have more examples as well. The second one, welfare checks. This is typically falling within a priority 4 call type. And situations related to this can include, let's say somebody's calling because they're concerned about somebody out in public and that person may need assistance. We've seen situations where employers are calling about out of character, no call, no show employees. There could be an out-of-state family member who is concerned about someone and they are asking police to do a welfare check. And in some instances, this can also include folks who are unsheltered as well. The third one we have is disorderly conduct. This one also is falling typically within a P4 category, and it can include situations where an individual or a group is acting in a manner that is a quality of life event, but there's no apparent crime that is taking place. It can also be disturbances and noise complaints. Examples of this are loud vehicles, music playing loudly, or parties as well. The fourth one we have is person in crisis. I want to note that typically person in crisis calls are coming in at a P3 or a P2, but this was something that really rose to the top with the commission. They were very interested in this category and really wanted to do work around this. And situations where a person in crisis may occur could be where a person's behavior puts them at risk of hurting themselves or somebody else, or is preventing them from being able to care for themselves. This can include situations around domestic issues, Project Lifesaver. So that is when a missing or vulnerable adult or child has a tracker bracelet on them. Or these are situations where there may be a suicide in progress. Number 5 that we have on here is assist citizen. This is general assistance. Typically, this does fall within a P4 category. And according to the St. Paul Police Department, this can be a category that is catching various different types of calls that are coming in. Some examples of this are situations where someone is dealing with a broken car, maybe somebody with a disability is in need of help, or situations where there may be somebody who calls in because they think somebody is suspicious walking around in their neighborhood, or if someone's looking for support during a contentious transfer of children from custody of one parent to another. Our next category is child abuse, and typically this is falling within a priority 4. And it's often defined as a child injured by an adult with authority over the child. And when this is showing up as a lower level call type, it can be assumed that the incident occurred sometime in the past and that at the moment of the call, the perpetrator, the individual who caused the harm, is not on scene. Then we have civil problems, so where no crime occurred. These are typically falling within a P4 category, and they can include situations where maybe there's a dispute over child custody, a dispute over neighbors, maybe it's between an employer and an employee, or a store owner and a customer, or the ownership of a vehicle. Those are some examples. And then vehicles and parking. They're typically situations happening within this category are within the P4 and P5 prioritization levels. And for P4, these calls tend to include accidents where there is property damage, but all of the drivers have stopped to exchange information. This could be a motor vehicle theft, a theft from an auto vehicle where there was no force, use of weapons, or confrontation occurring. And then when it shows up in a P4 prioritization, then this can be a category where it's an abandoned vehicle. Maybe it's a situation where somebody needs a tow, or there is a parking complaint. And I want to highlight, so those are all the different call type categories, again, that rose to the surface by the commission. And then during meetings 7, 8, and 9, so all 3 of those meetings, the commission then ideated, they further categorized, and they really narrowed down on specific recommendations for each of these 8 call type categories. And this was done through a combination of different surveys that we sent, small and large group conversations, and some very specific facilitated activities that happened within those meetings as well. And from that, through the prioritization of these, or the furthering down of recommendations for each of these call type categories, they were used to create our final recommendations survey. So we ended up administering this survey after our final meeting, meeting 10. And then if we can move to the next slide, Holly, I want to show you what that survey actually looked like. So on your screen are the actual questions from the recommendation survey. And this is the survey that we sent for alternative first response options to priority 4 and 5 calls for service. Granted, we know that the example of person in crisis falls outside of that P4 and P5, but we really sent this survey to understand what are the recommendations that were kind of coming to the top from those 8 call types that I showed you in the last slide. And so in order to create this final survey, we presented the ideas that had the highest support, again, from previous work that we had done with the commission. And the point of saying all that is just to say that everything that we've done really was the commissioners themselves coming up with ideas, ideating and brainstorming and really creating these recommendations, and each meeting built on the other. And that is the process that we used. And then we developed this to not only measure the support for the commission generated recommendations, we also wanted to measure the immediacy for implementation, as well as alignment with the problem the commission was committed to solving. So if you remember that flower graphic that Kate showed you a few slides ago, that is what we were measuring that against. And these 3 questions, again, were asked for each recommendation that the commission came up with. And I want to note that there was space for comments and there was no limit in those comments. So in the final report, you will find the comments from the commissioners for these recommendations. And then this final recommendation survey was administered to the commission, again, following our last meeting, which was April 21st. We kept the survey open until April 28th, and a total of 37 commissioners completed it. I do want to note that no fields were required, so we did have a slight deviation in the number of people who completed each question. And upon administering the survey, we ended up having a total of 46 commissioners. And so that led us to a response rate of about 80%. And a few things I want to note before we move forward into the recommendations, because a lot of the recommendations had received high levels of support, we ended up needing a way to categorize all of the different recommendations. And so the 3 different categories we had, the first one was, we call it top recommendations. And these are recommendations that receive 90% or greater total support on question A. And I'm realizing that one typo that we have on here is that all of the questions are labeled A. So our apologies on that. The first question, do you support this idea? That is question A in reality. The second question, if you do, please indicate prioritization implementation. That is what I'm referring to as question B. And then the last third question you see there around alignment of goals, that is question C. So I just wanted to note that, as I see we have a spelling error there. So again, going back to the categories of how we categorize these recommendations, the first category is top recommendation. Again, that means that the recommendation itself received 90% or greater total support on that first question, and over 50% immediate implementation on that second question that we ask. The second category that we used was called next level recommendations. And these are recommendations that received 60 to 89% total support on question A, which is the first question on the slide, and over 50% immediate implementation on question B, which is that second question on your slide. And then the third category that we used, we called that additional recommendations. And these are recommendations that did not fall within either of those two recommendation thresholds that I just mentioned. These were outliers. So an example might be where a situation received high support on the first question, but maybe the immediate implementation was really low. It was less than 50%. So in the final report, you're going to see all of those recommendations. What we want to do today is just focus on the top recommendations. So Holly, if we're able to move to the next slide, that would be great. Thank you. So I just want to first mention that there are two slides with top recommendations. So this one and then the next one. And again, as you see on your screen, these are the recommendations that received 90% or more support from the commissioners and scored 50% or more on immediate implementation. And again, all of the recommendations will be in the final report. Today, we just wanted to highlight in on these because they had such high support. And I want to note that all of the recommendations that you're seeing here can be read as either this is a desired skill or behavior of first responders, or resources that would help achieve an optimal outcome for both the caller, community member, and responder. And also important to highlight, due to the complexity of this work and the realities of the scope and timeline that we were working with, we know that the final recommendations that have emerged that you are seeing right now, we know they're broad and we know they're high level. However, they had such strong support from the commission, and we think that it really leaves room for the city and community members and other folks to really best determine how to operationalize these within St. Paul. And I do want to highlight too, through the process of the commission work, we also learned that St. Paul Police Department, City of St. Paul staff, Ramsey County, and community providers are already doing a lot of the things that you see here right now. And so we, again, with the timeline and scope, we did not have the necessary time to go into all of that exploration to understand what is already happening, but we urge the city to do that exploration because there is a lot of great things currently happening. And Holly, if we could go to the next slide, please. And again, this is the second page of those top recommendations. As a reminder, these are the recommendations that had a 90% or more percent of support from the commission members and scored 50% or more on immediate implementation. So I'll give you a second to look at these. And we can come back to these as well. So I want to be respectful of time and make sure that council members, you have a chance to ask questions. Holly, if we go to the next slide, thank you. So I want to get into the remaining two charges of the commission. So everything I just talked about before was directly related to the P4, P5 charge that we had. Now we're going to get into some of the work that Kate mentioned that our collaborators at Harvard Kennedy School Government Performance Lab did. And the two remaining charges that they really looked at are, first, consider the creation of a city-staffed office to drive and integrate community-first public safety initiatives and strategies, i.e. an Office of Neighborhood Safety. You're going to hear language that interchanges between Office of Neighborhood Safety and Office of Violence Prevention. Through the conversations we had with the commission, the Office of Neighborhood Safety really was a language change that the commission wanted to see. Folks were not so much in favor of using violence prevention as the language. So again, we are talking about the same thing, but I just want to make sure you know that ONS and OVP are sometimes used interchangeably. And the second charge is recommend approaches for ongoing community involvement in the city's community-first public safety framework. And so the Harvard Kennedy School Government Performance Lab, I'll be referring to them as GPL going forward. They really focused on these two remaining charges, and we are so grateful for the work that they did. And the way they did this, so GPL developed a survey that was used to generate commissioner recommendations on these two charges. And they also created a final report that highlights everything that came out from those recommendations. And you will be able to find that. It's going to be located within Citizens League's final overall report that is going to be released on Friday. And in addition to preparing the survey and the final report, the GPL also conducted a landscape analysis of different offices of neighborhood safety from 17 other jurisdictions in order to better understand history, structure, and programming of offices like these. And if we can go to the next slide, please. So I'll get into more. Before I do get into the recommendations of the work that they did, I want to touch on the landscape analysis that they did because there is such rich information from that work that GPL did and really lays the foundation for the recommendations to come. So their landscape analysis involved reviewing more than 100 programs from 17 offices of neighborhood safety in the US. And in order to spot trends, the programs they saw were cataloged by characteristics such as violence prevention and target population. And in addition to reviewing the programs, GPL interviewed several subject matter experts and ONS leaders from various jurisdictions. A few examples of jurisdictions that they connected with, we have Albuquerque, New Mexico, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Pittsburgh, and Los Angeles County. And the analysis that they did was presented in two parts. So first, they included trends related to programming, ONS structures, and budgets. And then after receiving more than 50 questions and comments from the commissioners, they built the second half of the landscape analysis, and they included a case study on an ONS found in Richmond, California. And their presentation was made jointly. When they did this, they made it jointly with Director Sasha Cotton, who is a commission member and is the director of the Minneapolis Office of Violence Prevention. And a few highlights that I want to make about this landscape analysis, you can see them on your screen, and I'll walk through each of these. When they were defining, the definition of an ONS, they reviewed offices, the offices they reviewed really included a community-centric programming. The programs there were non-punitive, and the offices sat outside of police departments. They found that none of the 17 offices included alternative emergency response programs. And they found that community participation was central to the governance and operations of these programs. Highlighting some of the benefits and challenges, some of the benefits that they noted of these offices included the ability to give violence prevention programming stability. It also led to coordination in strategy and data sharing, and it really empowered communities through participation and staffing. And some of the challenges are that since these offices are relatively new and their efficacy hasn't been studied much, and they often take about 18 to 24 months to be implemented, and they do have to address mistrust that may be around between residents and the public sector. And then the reality is many of these institutions are relatively new. Many of them that they looked into had been established in the last 5 years. They really looked at the success of the Richmond office, though, which was launched in 2007, and that office's ability to address gun violence. And their office ended up inspiring a lot of the other offices that GPL ended up looking at. And what they found was that the Richmond office was able to significantly contribute to the reduction in gun-related homicides and hospital visits. And then more offices are coming. So one thing that GPL noted is that it's likely that more offices are going to be coming around the country within the next 5 years. And this is in direct response to the racial justice movement and call for reimagining public safety. And we think that this gives St. Paul an opportunity to be involved in this emerging national cohort of cities and counties experimenting in this space. In terms of programming, the most common category of programming is violence prevention services, such as interruption or credible messenger initiatives. And this is followed by restorative justice and reentry programs as well. In terms of structure, 10 of the 17 offices were housed under an executive, such as a mayor, and 5 were housed in a public health department, and that is the case in the city of Minneapolis. In terms of budgets, the budgets for these offices are only a fraction of police department budgets. So they found that there's a range between 1% and 4% of those budgets. For community governance, a theme that these offices had was related to inclusion of residents when it came to decision making. And they really saw this happening in the strategic planning process, as well as program evaluations and how budgets are determined. And then community participation. So all of the offices really intentionally included participation of residents, especially those who are most impacted by violence. We could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So now I want to get into the actual recommendations, and you'll see the highlights on the screen. These are not all of the recommendations that came out from this work that GPL did. You will find everything in the final report. But before we go into some of the highlights that we have here, I want to talk a little bit about the survey design strategy. And so GPL used what they learned in the landscape analysis to really map the key strategic questions that commissioners could consider that really helped to get to these final recommendations. And so these questions then became a survey that they used to generate the recommendations. And some of the goals of that survey that they sent to the commission were to define if the commission actually recommended an ONS office. And then they wanted to provide directional strategic guidance for city leadership, so asking some questions around that. And they wanted to provide accountable content, including a list of organizations to reach out to and commissioners who want to be a part of this work. And of the 47 commissioners, there were 39 that filled it out. At the time that they sent out this survey, we had 47 commissioners. And of those 39, so that means that there was 83% of the commission who completed the survey. And I do want to note too that there were comments that the commissioners made. All of that content is included in the final report. And then some of the key takeaways from the recommendations that were made. Again, this is just some of the highlights, snapshots. Everything is included in the report though. But most notably, I would say the vast majority, 95% actually, of commissioners recommend that the city create an Office of Neighborhood Safety. And again, considering that the commission had such an array of different folks, of different ideologies and backgrounds, this is definitely a notable number that 95% said they want to create an Office of Neighborhood Safety. There were 8 different categories of violence that commissioners could consider when they were recommending the focus for an ONS. And the first tier that they noted was really interested in gun violence and youth violence. And then the next tier of interest was group-based violence and structural violence. And these definitions of violence are found in the appendix of the report. Much of the definitions came from the Minneapolis Office of Violence Prevention and were also influenced by the OVP in Milwaukee as well. Another theme that came through in the questions and the recommendations was for the City of St. Paul to hire residents from St. Paul to staff the office, to be a part of it in different capacities, and to especially focus on residents who've been impacted by violence, either as perpetrators and or as survivors. And when we think about community governments, so in terms of sharing power and sharing decision-making with residents, strategic planning was the major way that folks recommended to do that. And then this is very notable too, 95% of commissioners indicated that they would like to continue to play a role in the development of an ONS and help design ongoing participation of community members in this work. And we can go to the next slide. Again, I really want to thank our partners at GPL for the hard work that they did on that. So I want to talk about the slide that you have in front of you. The issue of moving violations and traffic stops was not explored during the course of the commission's process. This was because those situations typically fall within a higher level priority. However, at our final meeting, meeting number 10, we did have a small group of commissioners who brought forward a presentation on pretextual traffic stops, and they brought forward a set of recommendations for the commission to consider. And you will see those recommendations. It's the 3 that you see there on your screen. I want to note a couple of things. So many commissioners did express a sense of urgency around this topic, and particularly in response to the killing of Dante Wright by a police officer in Brooklyn Park during a traffic stop. And while the commission did not have a chance to explore and vet the issue of pretextual traffic stops as thoroughly as they would have liked, and it did not go through the same process as the other recommendations, we did decide to include this item in the final survey that we did in order to get a sense of where the commission's sentiment was on this issue. So in the survey, we asked the commission the questions we asked them for all of the recommendations. As a reminder, we asked them, do you support this idea? Yes or no? We asked them if they do support it, to indicate how they would prioritize implementation of the idea, whether immediate, secondary, or long-term. And then we asked them to identify how these recommendations aligned with the goals they defined. So again, we asked them to look at that flower graphic and define how do these 3 things align with those goals that you as a commission defined. And so you'll see here on the screen that all of those recommendations that were brought to them received 69 to 80% total support and between 63 and 86 immediate implementation. So the specific numbers are going to be listed in the final report, but we wanted to make sure to bring this forward as well. Next slide, please. So before I wrap up, a couple of things, that I want to mention around context and considerations that we thought are really important as you think through these recommendations and the work that the group did, the commission did, to keep these things in mind. So just noting, we all know we're still in the COVID-19 pandemic, and just want to note that there was a lot of stress that was added to the process that I will talk about because of the pandemic. I want to highlight too that there was a lot of tension around public safety and law enforcement itself that was really at the core of this work and this process. There were a number of violent incidents and police-related incidents that occurred during the span of the commission's work, which we did acknowledge at each meeting and provided space to debrief and be in small groups with one another. But a couple of situations that I want to mention were the killing of Dalal Eid by Minneapolis police officers, the killing of Desandria Wallace and her 2 children in a domestic incident after a welfare check. And welfare checks, as you remember, was one of the priority areas that this commission looked at. There were several mass shootings in other states, and one that was specifically targeting Asian American individuals. And there was an increased level of violence that we saw in past months towards the API community. In January, as we remember, we saw the attack on the US Capitol in Washington. And a few weeks later, we had a transition from the Trump administration to the Biden administration. And finally, this project began 7 months after the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis. And then the trial of previous officer Derek Chauvin began midway through our project. And in the last month of this work of the commission, Dante Wright, a Black man, was killed by an officer during a traffic stop in Brooklyn Center. Throughout the weeks that we spent our time together, our communities experienced protests, barricadings of government buildings, expanded law enforcement presence. The guilty verdict of the Chauvin trial was announced the afternoon before our last commission meeting. And I just want to note that commission members described this time as stressful, intense, and exhausting. And we saw the ways in which many commission members were directly involved in these issues, either through community care and advocacy, their own personal experiences, and we saw law enforcement and peace officers being directly involved as well. And then the virtual nature of this work and the commission size. Due to COVID, we did have to meet virtually, and that did lead to the potential of Zoom burnout, fatigue, and possible disengagement. I think, navigating a size of 48 commission members, it was challenging, but we did our best to engage folks through different tools that Zoom offered. The chat function actually proved to be really beneficial, and then small group conversations where we provided time in almost every meeting to do that and to build connection and community with one another. I do want to note the commission's scope. Every single charge was complex, and there was not enough time to dive into the nuances or complexities of each of the charges in the scope. And yet, despite all of the things that I mentioned, I would say that an overwhelming number of commissioners expressed interest in wanting to stay engaged in this work, and a dedication and commitment to seeing the implementation of these recommendations be successful. So before I turn it over to our co-chairs for some final words and then over to the council for questions, I want to make sure to mention that our final report is going to include all of the recommendations at all of the different levels that I mentioned. And we're going to include details of all of the meetings, and details of all of the meetings can actually be found on our website. We do post the minutes there, so you can look at those now if you'd like as well. You are going to see commission member comments on the recommendations and also final statements that folks submitted. And then we are going to have lots of resources and additional information within the appendix of the report. So on behalf of Kate and I just want to thank you all so much for having us, for sitting through our presentation. We know it was a lot of content. We are happy to answer any questions that you have. And I'd like to turn it over to our awesome co-chairs, Akua and John, for some final comments.
Amanda, thank you very much. Kate as well. Wonderful presentation and just a solid summation of many months of very hard work. Council President Brent Moen, council members John Marshall with Excel Energy. It's a pleasure to see many of your faces here today, all of your faces rather. For those that I don't know well, just real quick primer, I grew up in St. Paul, fourth generation. Parents met in kindergarten. I grew up in both my parents' house, classic St. Paul story. But I come to this work really wearing two hats, certainly a work hat, working for Excel Energy, one of St. Paul's larger employers. We've got about 600 employees between our power plant on the river there, as well as our service center up on Rice, right up in the Ward 5 area. But then personal, again, grew up here, lifelong constituent, raising my kids here, cared deeply about the city. I just think a couple quick thoughts. I think it's really important to reflect on the value of the journey these last few months have been. It was an absolutely complex and heavy lift to endeavor, but I'm really proud of all the work the commissioner did. I think I just reflect on one meeting in particular. In the same meeting, we had a commissioner who was a first or second generation Somali police officer share a story when he went into his black barber shop he's been going to for 15 years. And the barber, who he had considered a friend, tossed him out and told him to get out. And he said that we've been friends for years. Said, now you're wearing that uniform, you're out. And in the same meeting, one of our fellow commissioners, she offered a story that she has personal trigger, having some of the officers on this commission phone in from their squad cars because that's their availability and that the uniform's triggering. So wherever else can you find a space created for such healthy discussion and sharing of lived experiences that afford dignity and some civil discourse? So again, I just really commend the whole commission. I really commend Kate and Amanda for exceptional work throughout. I want to thank my co-chair, Akua, who has just been an absolute solid rock and is a good friend. I appreciate everything. But I do want to thank council. I want to thank the mayor's office and all who had a hand in assembling this dynamic cross-section of folks. We talked about all the instances that occurred in parallel collectively across the country during this journey. And oftentimes these meetings were just almost a therapy session to go through such complex thoughts and endeavors. So we never were alone. 48-member commission was monstrous. And certainly in a virtual environment, but really just a ton of value on the journey. And I know today's about recommendations, but wanted to at least just note that and offer my sincere thanks. So I'll turn it to my co-chair, Akua, now for some thoughts and comments.
Awesome, and I will keep it very brief. Thank you all for your time and attention. Akua Ellis, I've met most of you, if not maybe Nelsie, you and I have not met, but it's a pleasure to see your face in the square here. I want to just quickly say thanks and express appreciation for Mayor Carter, and not only for pulling the commission together, but for acting like he didn't hear me when I said no initially, because this has been an incredible opportunity, a tremendous kind of weight. The gravity of this work is not something that was lost on anyone around the proverbial table. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to have been able to help shepherd the process. A big thanks to Amanda and Kate for what must have felt like a Herculean task. I know there were times where we were having planning meetings and I was like, you know what, I've got to go figure it out. And they figured it out. And, I'm so appreciative of that. And that you all have been tremendous kind of stewards of this process, especially I want to just flag the point that Kate was maybe 1 or 2 months in role when she accepted this opportunity. Such an awesome responsibility. So I want to call that out and thank you all for your partnership. And then last but not least, give a big shout out to John Marshall, who you just heard from, who was the perfect yin to my yang. Anybody who knows the two of us knows that is absolutely the case. And I think the work moved forward as it did, largely because of our partnership and complementary strengths. I'm super thankful for your insight, wisdom, commitment, and friendship, John. And so, as you all consider next steps, I want to urge you to leverage the 5 areas that showed up in that flower graphic that have been outlined by commission members. I want you to leverage that as your lens for whatever happens next. Because you heard about the breadth of perspectives and individuals represented on the commission, and that flower graphic really represents consensus among all of those. Like, we were actually really surprised at how aligned our thinking was in terms of what problems we want to solve together. So we've done a lot of heavy lifting for you. If you use that as your lens and whatever moves forward, I think you'll be in really good shape. The one last thing that I would offer is my hope and expectation as a St. Paul homeowner, resident, and mother of a Black boy, is that the conversation that follows this, as we move into the budget season, that you all are also leveraging the report, the corresponding research, and all the things that have been compiled as part of this project to have a more nuanced conversation around law enforcement and thinking more globally about public safety. It's not just law and order, and it's not just police. I mean, like, I want to hear a really robust, thoughtful, and nuanced conversation about what public safety looks like and what's possible, because we are at the epicenter. Like St. Paul, the Twin Cities, we are at the epicenter for meaningful change on this topic. The eyes of the country, if not the world, are watching us. And we have a tremendous opportunity, and we are well suited to set a course forward for the folks that follow and for our neighbors, honestly. To what's possible. And so I am incredibly, number one, I'm grateful that it's done. So let me just be real about that. I am tremendously honored to have been a part of the work, and I'm hopeful for what will follow.
Thank you, Akua. Thank you so much. And I think, just reflecting back, what I heard presenters say today is that the Citizens League really took a challenging and sometimes and politically charged conversation and treated it with professionalism, with respect, and provided us with thoughtful, actionable items. And I that was the one slide that I like took a picture of, even though I know I have the presentation in my inbox, but I just want to be able to open that back up and just kind of keep reflecting and really specifically to what Ms. Ellis just said is this is coming at a time that tees up the recommendations and the thinking, and especially I appreciate the shout back to the flower graphic where the alignment was as we determine our budget for 2022, and also as we consider this incredible opportunity with the American Rescue Plan dollars, which are, can and should be used to confront spikes in gun violence that we've seen under COVID, but also that are a culmination of generations of systemic, institutions that have led us to where we are today. So we have an opportunity that 6 months ago we didn't know we would have, with funds to back up the recommendations that are in front of us. So it is a huge opportunity beyond, I think, our wildest dreams, that we could have these recommendations in front of us today and an opportunity to act on them. So I appreciate that, the call to action. And I think that is what we've been wanting as a council to kind of step out of the political conversation and into the action, like what's our plan to move forward in a different manner. So thank you so much for the work that's in front of us. And I know now it's, Ms. Ellis is like, I'm glad it's done. And I'm like, oh gosh, now we got to start our side of this work, but it makes it much easier. But it makes it much easier to have the thoughtful recommendations of this distinguished group in front of us. So I will look to Ms. Yang and Ms. Naker with hands up. Let's start with Ms. Yang.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Council President. Well, thank you so much for the very detailed presentation, and thank you to all of the members of the commission. This is really meaningful work, and Amanda, I would really like to say thank you for holding space for the people who have lost their lives due to police brutality, due to misconduct, and really naming the atrocities that have happened in our country here, which are all a result of the white supremacy that's deeply embedded in our systems. And when I think about why this work is so important, it's because we cannot keep operating in a world where law and enforcement is the solution to all the social issues that we are experiencing. We really need to do things differently. And the work here is, and also like all the things that you named are really indicative of the need for us to make change, and it needs to come from the community directly. So again, I'd like to say thank you to all of you for the tremendous work that you have done. I have a couple of questions. I'm curious if you were able to get input on what commissioners were hungry to do, even beyond the work of the commission here. You mentioned that many of them were interested in staying on board, and I really love to hear what that looks like so that we can start redreaming what that is as well. And the another question here is, when you listed off, when some of you listed recommendations, you mentioned, well, this work is already being done, which I think is really great to hear. I'm wondering, do you, did the commission see value in having certain roles or buckets of work live in, let's say, like the Office of Neighborhood Safety? And if yes, what would those tasks or roles be? Because I did hear one of you say that that there's a lot of value in that. So those are the questions I have for now, and I'll hold off on the other ones.
Thank you, council member.
I can chime in
start.
on the latter one.
Oh.
I remember it.
Go ahead.
Around alternatives, or where there was a lot of interest. You know,
Yeah,
so there,
people staying involved.
we saw considerable responses related to abandoned vehicles, for example, or parking violations. There, you'll see recommendations and comments related to recommendations around, you know, what does it look like for increased parking officer engagement? Or is there a role for public works, for example, to address some of those things because they're on the streets? And is there another way to think about it? So like, that's an example. There's also at the end of the report, a list of all those things that were kind of brought up that are currently underway. And you'll see the commissioners are not shy. Lots of thoughts about the extent to which those things are helpful.
I'd also offer one more comment. I think going back to the early meetings when we were in the discovery phase and doing the research, and you mentioned, Councilmember Yang, what other services are out there or other programs that are working right now? Probably some additional due attention to inventory those. I think there were a lot of aha moments, certainly early in the commission hearings or the commission meetings, when they were discovering programs, either at the city or the county or whatever department, that were just aha moments. So a total spread inventory of those on the going forward, just from a prudency standpoint, avoiding duplication might be helpful.
Yes, a lot of that will be in the final report and was done as part of the project. One big challenge, though, is that a lot of the other services, whether they are more technical or administrative response or alternative response supports, may not be available 24/7. You know, we still live in a world where police, in many cases, are the only 24/7, 365, every minute of the day. You can call that number and get in the queue. So I think that's a big area of opportunity. To the other part of your question, Councilmember Yang, commissioners staying involved, that was a question specifically on the ONS, the Office of Neighborhood Safety survey, and that is where 95% of commissioners said they would like to stay involved with the Office of Neighborhood Safety, exploration, design, construction, or community input. But overall, I do think that people just really want to stay involved in this work. What you have now, City of St. Paul, is a group of people who have learned a ton about this topic, have learned a ton about the resources in the city, have had a chance to envision beyond the current state, and now know each other and have some relationships to build on. So it's a great, you know, use them and make use of their passion and their interest in this work.
I think
I
data
did wanna-
is another area.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Akua. I did want to add, Councilmember Yang, to your first question. So yes, that question was specific to the ONS that GPL asked, but throughout the commission meeting, to Akua's point around data, we heard a lot of folks be very interested on data collection, sharing, gathering, just everything data related. Also on AI automation. So thinking about the ways to use artificial intelligence, whether it is, I think Akua mentioned, tickets, right? And how do you provide tickets? Is it a way to automate that So you'll see that further broken down in the actual report. Also, I remember many commissioners mentioning throughout the surveys that we sent them that they wanted to see a commission like this continue. So not to say we're not volunteering, that everybody on the commission said they want to stay on, and certainly Akua, myself, Kate, right? But I do think there was a lot of folks that said something like this should continue. And then thinking about how do you engage this group of amazing folks that the mayor brought together in that ONS, and how do you use the wisdom that's there to help kind of build that out. So those are some of the ways I would say folks mentioned they want to stay involved.
And before we move to Ms. Naker, I just will say, as a council too, we have an opportunity and a platform to continue diving into some of the questions that we'd like, to look at further, and maybe we can engage some of the commission members in panel discussions, what have you, because I share, I have a lot of interest in when we talk about if 57% of 4 and 5 calls are the 57% of the calls to the police are priority 4 and 5. I also think priority 4 and 5 take up a lot of time. And so is there a hybrid way too, where we, if the police is dispatched in an off hours time, can we then hand off a call to a more appropriate, handler of the situation? I don't know, what are some ways that we can triage to make better use of our police officers and have more appropriate help for the person who's calling, especially in situations where we're not sure from the onset what's happening. So I would be interested in partnering with you, Ms. Yang, to figure out how we can use our council platform to dig deeper into some of those questions as we walk into our budget season as well. So I think it's worth, there's only so much ground one commission with 50 people can cover, and it's certainly a great opportunity to be able to build off that as you suggest. So Ms. Naker and then Ms. Prince have hands up.
Thanks, Council President. I just can't thank all of you enough, the co-chairs, everyone who worked on this. I can't imagine what it was like to get all of this done by 3 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon. That is quite a lot of work for a week. I want you to know that I really feel the weight of this moment. I think we've all been so eagerly anticipating these recommendations. And I know that when you wrap up a process, and I appreciate, John, the way you talked about how the process itself is a huge outcome. When you wrap up a process like that, that's taken so much of people's time and effort and and trauma that people have been experiencing as they've even been going through the process, that's a really precious thing to then be handing over to us and say, here it is, please don't just let this sit. And I want you to know that I feel that, and I'm hearing that. And I know all of us are committed to taking it forward. I'm really looking forward to digging into the contents of the report itself. I know that final reports to council members are always given in sort of headlines and underlined headings, but that the actual work is in the bullets and the sub bullets. So I'm really eager to get into those. And I know that there was only a certain amount that this commission could do, but I am curious, does the report get it all into prioritizations as to next steps, sort of lowest hanging fruit that could be done, right away, versus things that are going to need to wait until the budget process versus things that are further afield from that?
Absolutely, and that was the beauty of the final survey design, is that after commission members generated the ideas that they then did the final survey on, that we asked, do you support this? Yes, no, and prefer not to answer was also an option there. But then that implementation question of how soon should this be implemented if you support it? Should it be immediate in the 2022 budget? Should it be in 2 to 3 years out, or should it be further out? And when you, Councilmember Naker, go into those sub bullets, which I love knowing that you will see some verbiage that we explained. For example, this item that was voted on in the recommendation survey, maybe it got really high support, but it got really low on immediate implementation, which means that the majority of people think, awesome idea, do it. We got like 85% support for it, but it got more like majority support on this is a 2 to 3 years out item. So you'll be able to see that and really see where people landed on those perspectives. Other points on that?
No, I think you nailed it. You may find, so, the assumption has been that we were preparing these recommendations to inform the 2022 budget cycle. But to the point that Councilmember Brenmoen made earlier about this influx of dollars, you may find as you look at those immediate recommendations that there are some things that can be activated right now.
Right. Ms. Prince.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone. I want to reiterate all that my colleagues have said before me, to thank Kate and Amanda from the Citizens League. It was so good to see Amanda again working on this project. Akua and John, I felt so good about your selection as co-chairs of this effort, and the committee itself represented such a great diversity of perspectives, and the fact that you have been meeting over these difficult months, as Amanda pointed out, the numbers of local, state, and national crises that have been going on in this area. I think it was really, I think this is kind of an important catharsis for our city, that we have had this process, that key people who have important perspectives have been at the table developing these recommendations, is super important and valuable, and does give us a great platform from which to start acting. I also want to say how much it meant to me to see those top recommendations and how they reflect what, I guess they reflect kind of what I hoped they would. I think that that was what I was hoping to get out of this process. And I do think it's significant that a number of them are in some form of being done already, or are definitely in the mix of things that we have been looking at and considering. So the recommendations really, to me, reflect St. Paul and where we're at on these issues. And St. Paul is just simply different from other cities. And I think, and that's what I'm so happy to see here, that it's not that kind of, national crisis of policing. So what are we going to be doing to dismantle or whatever? I mean, these recommendations fit so well with the way that our city works together. So in any event, I'm delighted with it. And I just want to thank you. I don't have any specific questions right now, but I do look forward to seeing the entire report in detail. And again, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart.
And Ms. Prince, to your point, I think with like the Harvard Kennedy School's recommendations about the Office of Violence Prevention or neighborhood safety, as they're referring to it, we're ahead of the game compared to a lot of cities. And so when they talk about 18 months to implement, we may have an advantage and a head start because of the way our community is activated and because of this conversation, particularly with the Citizens League. So I think that time will be able to be shortened because St. Paul is different, and because this work has started, and because our community is active and productive. I would say constructive is the word I was looking for. So that was heartened.
Thanks, Council President Brenmoen, because I do think you're right. I think that, the discussion at the council and administration level about putting together a community first public safety cabinet or commission, started back before 2019. I mean, I think we have been setting our sights on this kind of the creation of a commission or a cabinet that informs our work going forward. And it's great to know that the people who are part of this, who are really an outstanding group of community leaders, many of them are interested in staying on board. to be part of that. So I think that that's another invaluable outcome.
Yep, and again, puts us ahead, so that's great. I see Mr. Tolbert, and then I think let's give Ms. Jalali the last word as our representative on the Citizens League. But Mr. Tolbert?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I want to echo what my colleagues said in thanking the Citizens League as well as the co-chairs for all the time and quite frankly, the very clear and concise recommendations going forward. That's very helpful. As a policymaker, I can tell you that is very helpful to have that. And I also want to, I suspect they're probably watching because they've spent so much time on it, but thank all the committee members that were on it. It was a huge group, and it was an all-star group of thought leaders and community leaders and business leaders and others in our city. So I really thank them for taking time to do this on a volunteer basis. That is one of the reasons St. Paul is a great city, is because we have so many people willing to toss their thoughts into the ring and talk about these tough issues. Also, specifically, Councilmember Jalali, I know all of us would have wanted to be on this committee, but I know you're the one that was able to do it, and we're grateful for you taking all the time and having to miss a lot of council policy sessions in order to be a leader on that group. So thank you for that. It's much appreciated for representing all of us on the group. Going forward, I just will say we appreciate the work that you have done to the co-chairs and the Citizens League and all the members. But we also need your help going forward too, both to ensure that we move these issues forward and also for your expertise in making sure that we do it in the best interest of our community. So thank you everybody for being involved, and I look forward to moving on to the next steps in this process.
Thank you, Mr. Tolbert. And Ms. Jalali.
Thank you. It's been really great to see so much hard work presented, and I'm admittedly kind of emotional just seeing it all come to fruition. And so I really want to thank from the bottom of my heart our partners at the Citizens League and our commissioners, because I think you all have shown really what the heart of this work is like and how hard it is. I don't think people, people of the universal sense, not the folks on this call, but people don't understand generally how emotional this work is, and that what we were asked to do was look at what is happening to people, go to where the pain of the problem is, look at the array of data, knowledge, and lived experience that is a part of designing something different, and then advancing a process that provides some groundwork for then changing things. And it is an extraordinary undertaking. It is significantly difficult, and you all approached this work with determination, openness. It was at times challenging emotionally to many commissioners because there are cycles of trauma happening that are playing out, because folks, including you all and our commissioners, were going through like what the status quo of our country is right now in our community, while then being asked to design something different. And I've been thinking a lot about crisis thinking and how we spent so much of the pandemic, and the pandemic is still ongoing, right? But for many, many, many months, we've all been asked to live in a state of crisis thinking, and we haven't been able to build structures and systems that get us out of those cycles and help us live lives that are free and well and life affirming and supportive. And I felt that vision lifted up by our commissioners, and then you all met that and worked to translate that into what we have. And I see this report as the first opening of an ongoing process for this year to take everything we've heard over the time since I've joined the council, and then what our community has been through, and staying in community to engage and design that. So that is another phase of the work, and then the phase of the work that's the budget process. And I am just really, really honored to have been a part of it. I'm honored and I'm grateful to you all to allow me to have a space on this commission. I just can't say enough how committed I feel to this work, and how much I feel this will give us a basis to continue advancing it, and to continue advancing it in a way that's accountable to our community, to the vision that we say we're here to advance, and
that is rooted in, the idea of the people closest to the pain of the problem are closest to the solution, and how do we continue making sure that what we design is in partnership with our impacted community members, and how we can make something be different for our city. And Akua, you put it best that our community is at the epicenter of this work, and so sometimes it's hard to remember that because we're here and we're just all here in our community. But knowing that the nation is following along, it gives me hope, even as that can feel scary, because it's bigger than all of us. So I look forward to staying in this work. I just wanted to express my deepest gratitude, and I look forward to continuing to do everything in my power to help advance the vision I think we all believe in. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Folks from the Citizens League, anything before we kind of switch gears and look at what's in front of us for next steps? I know you had closing statements as part of your presentation, but I just don't want to, if you had anything to say before we move along to next steps, I don't want to take that opportunity.
I just continue to express our gratitude for the opportunity to be involved in this work, and to the sentiments expressed by council members, and extra thanks to all of the commission members. Fantastic group of dedicated folks, and just a reminder that they had their own jobs and lives and families and everything else going on top of this, and they were just there in it with the group. So thank you so much to our commission members. And just underscoring, as has been said, that the city of St. Paul Police Department, Ramsey County, already so many promising practices and willingness to try to create new structures and systems. There needs to be non-systems and voices also involved in that conversation ongoing, which we have talked about today. And that is what emerged from this process is that outcome. But again, thank you to the folks at the city and county who have already been doing such great work along the way that have gotten us to this point.
That's great. Thank you. And folks, please be sure to share this on your social network so that people who were not able to watch live can see this broadcast, because I think it's great information and it just shows the thoughtfulness of the work. It's one thing to advocate for or rabble rouse or draw attention, and it's another thing to take those thoughts and go to work and present a plan and recommendation. And I just really appreciate that all of those things have come together. This has been a top priority for the council, as Ms. Prince was saying, for several years. But we also recognize that violence reduction and a healthy, safe community is multifaceted, and it really is going to require like 360 degrees of solutions to work. Next week, the council will be hearing about other community first public safety initiatives. Deputy Mayor Tincher will be here to report on that task force and some of the investments we've made in the past few years to go upstream in violence reduction and to focusing on intervention and prevention. And then after that update as a council, we will look forward to continuing to build with the community and with this commission, members of the commission, as we prepare for spending yet in 2021 programs, and also looking forward to 2022 and beyond. So the stage is set. We have more work on this topic next week, and then our calendar, as I've said, this is our priority. We know, again, housing is a huge priority for us, but we know that that's connected to public safety. So all of the things seem to keep tying back to these healthy, safe communities, and I believe we're in alignment with the mayor's office and the members of the commission on that matter. So big weeks ahead of us as we move forward with these top priorities for the council and for our city. So thank you to everybody for your incredible work here, and we're looking forward to continuing this partnership as we move forward. Thank you. Council members, it is 11:45. And so as usual, we've gone a little bit over, but I think it's important that we covered the ground we needed to cover. We will, if there's nothing else to come before us this morning, we will be adjourned until later today. Thank you. Gratitude.
Thank you all. Have a great one.
Thank you.